All right. Hello and welcome to ChooseFI. Today on the show, we have a real treat. We have Alan Corey, who is a Atlanta-based real estate jack of all trades with really the most interesting background in real estate that I've seen in a long time. And I knew I had to get him on the show as really an in-house ChooseFI expert on real estate. I'd love to have him back. I suspect this is going to be the first of many episodes with Alan. And in Alan's own words, and he is the author of the book House Fire, How to Be a Red-Hot Real Estate Millionaire with a Wealth of Time and Money to Burn. And I love this passage. He said, "Why am I the real estate expert? I currently own over 200 units of real estate. I'm a top producing realtor. I own a property management company. I've done rentals, flips, new construction, single family, multifamily, and apartment syndicates. I started from nothing and have now fat-fired with real estate at the age of 42. I believe this path is the fastest and safest path to fire after succeeding at the alternative paths to fire. I now want to focus on teaching others." And teach he is. So he has this book. He has a podcast called Real Estate Maximalist. And like I said, just has a wealth of knowledge. So with that, welcome to ChooseFI.
You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, Alan, welcome to ChooseFI. I realized as I was reading that passage that was an email you sent me a couple years ago. So that may have been a little bit old, but I think it's directionally accurate, right?
Yeah. That was 2 years ago. I've got a little bit, more. I've got more doors now, but the sentiment's there. Thank you for reading that, and that was a wonderful intro. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you here. So, okay, so that was underselling it. So, right, 200 units of real estate is outdated?
Yes. My peak was 350 doors. I just sold 50 single family home portfolio about a month ago. So now I'm down to about 300 doors. But that's my day. I'm my life. I'm buying and selling every day, every week, every month. So there's never going to be an accurate number. When this airs, it'll be a different number. Yes.
All right. Well, I want to actually dive into a couple of those things that you just said. So first, I always want to cut through terms and jargon, right? So when I hear real estate people talk about doors, I suspect that's actually slightly confusing to some people. So give me the definition of what a door is as opposed to hey, I own a home.
Yes, I don't like the metric. Being in the real estate space, it doesn't mean anything to other real estate people, but it does to people who are not in real estate, because a door is just basically saying, if I have a fourplex, a quadruplex, that's 4 doors, right? And so a lot of people kind of get their numbers out there and they say, hey, I own 1,000 doors. And you look at it and it's yeah, you own 1,000 doors that are $10,000 each. And, someone could own 2 doors that are $10 million each, right? It's a metric that doesn't really say how successful you are. It basically says how busy you are. So I have a lot of expensive, $1 million duplexes and triplexes, but it doesn't make that door, quote unquote door, sexy, right? Because I have so much invested in some, fewer doors, but high ticket value. But on the other side, I do own some apartment complexes that obviously really, really push my door count up. So it's a silly metric that means nothing, but everyone uses it for social proof. And so it's a shortcut to saying that you do a lot of real estate.
Yeah, no, I get it. And right, there is some, again, directional accuracy to it, right? In that, okay, if you own a quadruplex, how else or a quad, how are you going to say, okay, I have 4 tenants? If you're trying to get that across quickly to somebody, it's not just one unit, obviously. It's 4 different units and 4 different renters, et cetera. So I get it. But you said something super interesting in there. The number of doors is how busy you are.
Yeah, because you have to manage the leases, the turnover, fixing things. It's how many living spaces that you are responsible for. So at some point, you're going to have to scale. You're going to run out of time if you don't get a property manager and start outsourcing these things. But typically, I recommend your first 5 properties, do it yourself so you can learn and appreciate what your property manager is going to do for you later. I was basically stuck on 20 doors for years. And then once I started outsourcing my property management, that's when I rapidly scaled because all I had to do was focus on looking for deals and acquisition, and I didn't have to do the day-to-day stuff anymore.
Yeah, I like that. So 5, you're saying is kind of like a general rule of thumb that you give of do it yourself. Now that doesn't have to be, obviously. Like I own 2 pieces of rental property actually in your general vicinity in Georgia. And yeah, I look at it just as like a business. And actually, you had a good passage in the book, and you said one of the most common traps to avoid is this one: don't invest in something you want to live in yourself. Now, this is an aside, obviously, but it's getting to where I'm going. So please keep in mind that you're not buying your personal residence. You're not buying a property that you'd like to move into. You're buying a small business, and the best small businesses are the ones that utilize the best balance of price and quality, risk and reward. But I think the aspect that I wanted to dive in on now is small business, because that's critical to think of this truly as a business. And it's where I went wrong with kind of my real estate speculation issue that I had in my 20s.
Yeah. I have a free ebook that the very first thing I say is that passage that if you're just getting started in real estate, you have to overcome buying a house that you want to live in, because I know you're going to want that renovated property. You're going to want it that's next to the cool coffee shop, that's in the park, close to the transportation, short commute to work. But guess what? Everyone wants that. And you as an investor are going to pay a premium because those premium locations and areas, you pay a premium price. And the price you pay for that, the rent you can charge doesn't scale up to cover that premium in most cases. So you might be able to maybe break even in the best case scenario in this really hot neighborhood, but you're also investing in a 10 neighborhood, and a 10 neighborhood can't go into an 11. Only a 10 neighborhood could stay a 10 neighborhood and go down to a 9 neighborhood. But if you're investing in a 5 neighborhood, a 6 neighborhood, man, if that goes up to a 7 or 8, the appreciation on that house is going to go crazy, as well as the rental that you can charge, the rental amount that you can charge. And your tenants aren't living your life. Like your tenants might be like, this is the best kitchen I've ever had, or this is the safest street I've ever lived on. You might not want to live there. Your biases, your personal judgments might want to be there, but your tenant might be like, wow, I'm moving up in life by renting this property that to you would not want to live in. And it's okay. We all are in different paths in life, on different journeys and in different timelines. But I promise you, some of the worst homes, homes that I bought for $29,000, those tenants were so happy to move into that house based on the stories they told me where they came from. And this was like their dream come true. And they're paying $600 a month for it. And they were just so happy. They took such great care of that home. And so it's one of those things where you want to invest not based on your lifestyle decisions, but on spreadsheet decisions. Typically, people want to invest and they want to bring their family and their friends by and say, look at this home that I own and rent out, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Show them the spreadsheet, show your friends the spreadsheet and save yourself the driving around to the properties and pointing them out.
Yeah, that's pretty great. Invest based on spreadsheet decisions. That's good advice for life, I think, when it comes to real estate, for sure. Maybe generally, but certainly real estate. And I'm curious, so I think what a lot of people, myself included, get so bogged down on with real estate is just there are so many options, the myriad of options. And just even in this first 10 minutes, we've talked about the number of doors, how busy you are, and the complexity, et cetera. And you also mentioned something about like having a couple of luxury properties, but then also maybe luxury properties or the ones, let's say, the ones you would want to live in, which I understand are not synonymous necessarily, but at least closer. Maybe those you can't rent for as much on a percentage basis as you would a lower cost house. Like you just described that roughly $30,000 property that you rented for $600, which is 2% per month, right? That's the 2% rule of the purchase price. So there's all of these interplays, right? Between the doors, the luxury rentals, cash flow, which I think is what real estate people generally look at. I'm looking at net income in terms of like my accountant's brain, but also appreciation. Like this is a complex thing, Alan. And like, I understand it's personal preference, but I guess that's a very long preamble of like, how do you consider that whole interplay? Is it just case by case, or like, how do you approach it personally?
So what I do is different than what I would recommend to first timers, obviously, right? So I'm an opportunity hunter. I'm also a realtor and I got a real estate team. half of my clients are real estate investors. And so they'll come to me and say, I have this need, I have that need. And typically, I don't like to give advice on something unless I've done it myself. So if someone wants to do short-term rentals, I'm going to go buy a short-term rental so I can be a better teacher and mentor to other investors. So I am investing in everything, one, for my own learning. But a lot of times, an investor will come with me and I'll say, hey, if you don't buy this, I'm going to buy it because this is such a good deal and you should really buy it. Like, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. This is how much I believe in this. And I'm never going to force anyone to buy anything, right? But sometimes they're like, okay, we'll sleep on it. And they're like, no, it's not for us right now. And I'll go buy it, right? So a lot of times those opportunities are not necessarily things I'm looking for. Someone else asked me to look for them. And so that's what I do personally. But I always say, if you're getting new to this, you will freeze if you sort of take that approach, because someone will find the best quadruplex in their hometown, right? And then they'll find the best vacation property in the next state over. And then they'll find a condo in the best school district. And they're all profitable, right? And they found the best one of each product type. And then they freeze because they're like, which of these three can I buy or should I buy? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Just buy one. You found the best of that product type in that area. And if it's profitable, go ahead and buy it. But it's impossible for me to tell you the vacation rental's better than the quad in your hometown or the condo that's in the best school district, because there are 3 different tenant types, right? And there are 3 different markets. There's 3 different product types. You can be successful in all of them. Just pick one. And if you're just starting out, pick one, rinse and repeat. So say you pick the quadruplex in your hometown. Then your next purchase should be a quadruplex in your hometown. And then the third purchase. And then all of a sudden you are the expert. And what happens, and this happened to me, I got a reputation of being the guy who buys quadruplexes because I bought 3 on the same street. And then all the neighbors and tenants and everyone was like, oh, you need to talk to Alan. He buys quadruplexes. And then all of a sudden I started owning all the quadruplexes in the town. I wasn't looking for them, but they would call me and say, Alan, will you buy this? Or I had real estate agents calling me saying, Alan, I've never sold a quadruplex. I don't know what I'm doing. Can I refer this client to you? And I'll be like, listen, I'll just buy it. This is great. And so I always tell people, put out what you're doing. Social media does this really well. I've been at this for 22 years. I'm 44, half my life. Social media didn't exist when I got started. But by telling people what I'm doing or what I bought today, then the best deals are finding me. People call me, oh, I've got that. Oh, you're buying teardowns for new construction? I've got 3, let me call Alan. And so the deals are finding me because I'm putting it out there. But you have to start on the MLS. Everyone does. That's how I got started. I got started with a $99,000 condo in Brooklyn, New York, and a 1-bedroom that I found on the MLS. But everyone's got to start there, and it gets easier as you go.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot there. And again, my mind goes to, and I think this is just more because I've had those formative experiences with real estate that were slightly negative, and my brain immediately goes to, okay, you're becoming the expert in quadruplexes in one town. How do you think about diversification and not having all your eggs in one basket? Like, would you buy, like you said, you bought 3 of these on one block. So that's 12 doors. Like, my brain immediately goes to, oh man, I wish I would have 12 doors spread throughout the country or something like that, as opposed to 12 doors on one block. But I suspect there are significant economies of scale, building teams in one area, like many, many positives that my kind of lizard brain that's just scared isn't thinking of right now.
Yeah, well, I stumbled upon this, but once you hit 10 doors, then I had property management companies bidding for my services. And so it used to be 10%. And then all of a sudden, I was getting quotes for 6%. And so I was like, oh, and this goes even further if you get like a 20-unit apartment building or whatnot. But
and that, sorry to interrupt, Alan, but those 10 doors, that's generally like in one, how small of an area? Like if you were in Huntsville, Alabama, like is it the greater Huntsville, Alabama area, or is it like one particular couple block area?
So it depends on the property manager, right? Because the property management's a small business. It's whatever their service area is. So have that conversation with your property manager. And also, property managers have specialties in that some only do luxury housing, some only do Section 8 housing, or whatever it is. So find out what your property management, their skill set is, and then build to that. That's a quick way to scale. It actually reduces your expenses, and they get happy.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And that's a massive expense, right? For people who are owning rental property, that 10% management fee. Again, if you're looking at this as a business and you're not the one showing up at 3 a.m. to fix the broken toilet or water leak, you have a property manager, right? But 10% is generally significant. But like you're saying, I think the term we use at ChooseFI is everything is negotiable.
Right.
And it's cool to know that as like a rule of thumb about, okay, 10 properties. But I suspect, just like you said, talk to the management company. It might be 8, it might be 6. If they're a brand new management company, they might give you a deal if you ask and bid other people against them, et cetera. So again, everything is negotiable. It's just immediately comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and I want to circle back and saying that like 12 units was scary for you, but to me, I look at real estate as investing. The more you get, the more I'm building a mutual fund of real estate. So this is a hot button topic that you guys talk about a lot, which is paying off your mortgage. And to me, that is putting all your eggs in one basket. Because if I have one property that's paid off, I could probably have one paid off property, or I could have 12 with mortgages. But with one paid off property, if I have a vacancy, I'm losing money because I'm still paying property taxes and insurance. But with 12, I could have 3 vacancies and I'm still breaking even because it's a mutual fund and some are going to perform better than others. And I'm spread out that risk, even though it's on the same street, I've spread out the risk of vacancy. And then what happens is if I do have a vacancy, I can renovate just one unit, really try to push the rental amount and say, how much can I get for this? And if I get it, then I know, I can renovate every other unit and hit this rent amount. But if I don't, then I'm like, okay, then I can save my money and not renovate the other 11 units. But if I have one property, I'm doing a lot of risk by putting a lot of money and then, fingers crossed, I hope I get this new rent amount. And if I don't get it, it's just another month vacant. Then I get desperate and then I drop it down to what it was before. And I just put a bunch of money into it and I didn't get a return on that.
Yeah, that is very, very cool. I like the concept of the mutual fund. And yeah, there's a lot here, certainly with the paying off mortgages we can talk about. Again, I think a lot of people's minds go immediately to their own primary residence. And I think that's not what we're talking about here necessarily, though, of course, that is part of real estate. So we can talk about that in a minute. But in terms of the mutual fund, and I've said on the show a number of times in that I would rather personally, and again, this is with my like kind of scared lizard brain when it comes to real estate. It's like,
I don't think anyone thinks you have a lizard brain, but okay. Yeah. You're a smart guy.
I would rather have 20 properties than one.
Right. Yeah. Same here.
Right? Because then I can wrap my mind around, okay, this is a business and there are going to be vacancies and that's fine, as opposed to when you have one and it's vacant, you're at 0 then.
Yes. And then let's scale this, right? Most people who's ever rented before, very rarely does the landlord just keep the rent amount each year, right? There's always a rent bump. And so I even put it in my leases like, hey, in a year, your new rent's going to be X. Then let's just say it's $25 or $50 more. So if I have one property and I raise it $50, great. I made an extra $600 a year. But imagine if you got 12 properties and all 12 lease renewal, you pushed it $50. And what is that? $7,200 a year. And so that not only am I reducing my risk, I'm making more money by having more properties. And this is where everyone freaks out, especially in the FI community. And I used to be there. I know I was lean fire. Throughout my 20s, I lean fired and was all about cutting as much debt out as possible. But you get more tax breaks the more properties you have. So all the income that I make becomes taxes deductible. This is where the level where you can become a wealthy person that everyone hates because you're not paying taxes. But it all comes down to, depreciation on these properties and whatnot. You also have mortgage interest deduction that you can't have if you have a paid off property. And then you also have 12 tenants helping pay down a large balance on your mortgage note. So you're getting paid about 3 or 4 different ways by doing it this way, which makes complete sense to me. And FI should all be about math, right? And this is taking the emotion out of it, taking the lifestyle out of it, and really applying just spreadsheet decisions to everything. And I have been at this long enough. I've helped people long enough. A lot of people's real estate horror stories are a combination of they made a lifestyle decision on a property. And because they made a lifestyle decision, they were put in position to sell that property based on that lifestyle decision. So for instance, their one real estate story is I bought this property and it was hot in the market and whatever. And then I had to sell it because I got a job offer, or I sold it because I have a divorce or a baby or whatever, a new marriage. And so their exit strategy was also based on lifestyle, and they had no control of timing. So that really, you're just gambling at that point because you're buying something on a whim because its timing's right, and you sell something on the whim because the timing is right. For a real estate investor, my expenses are always fixed for the most part, right? Because I get 30-year mortgages. So that's not going to change too much. And property taxes and insurance go up a little bit, but I don't have to sell in a down market. I had a $1.3 million duplex at one point. During the 2008, 2009 crash, it went down to $700,000 in value. And if that was my home and I lost my job and I had to move or whatever and be forced to sell it, I would have lost $600,000. But because this was a crash and I was renting it out, I could just wait it out. And during the crash, what I learned was there was actually higher demand for rents. There's higher demand for renters because a lot of people couldn't afford a home anymore, or they came from a place where they've lost their job or they lost their house and now they have to rent. So in the situation where everyone else was freaking out, I had more applicants than I could do with. And so I was able to raise the rent because I was not beholden to someone else's timeline when I was going to sell this property. It was a buy and hold, and my expenses were fixed. I didn't get an ARM, which was a lot of a crash, right? And so down markets make my job less risky because I know I'm going to have more renters.
Yeah, that's a very cool rethink on something. And you're right, is when you're investing based on spreadsheet decisions, which means these properties were producing net income for you, right? You're not investing based on speculative appreciation, which, I mean, frankly, there are real estate investors who build appreciation as a massive part of their strategy. And that's fine, to each their own, right? So there's some people who obviously fix and flip, et cetera. Like there are very, very rational ways to invest in real estate that were either forced appreciation, natural appreciation. I get that. But I think my brain works similarly to how you're describing yours here in that, okay, spreadsheet says there's net income here. And therefore, it almost doesn't matter what the current market price of that property is, as long as I'm still producing net income every month, right?
Not only do I not care about the current market price, I don't care about the interest rates because because
you're locked.
Yeah, because if I'm buying something at a 10% interest rate and it's still net income for me, I'm going to buy it. And so that's why a lot of people are like, I'm going to wait until the market changes. And I'm like, okay, great, more deals for me. But it's,
you are the opportunity hunter, right?
Yeah, right. Like I tell people, marry the property, date the rate. So if you like the property, it's cash flowing, marry it, buy it. Because in the future, if interest rates change, you can refinance and get a lower rate. If they don't, who cares? Because you're still making money month to month.
So, okay, you said, I don't care about the interest rate. When I heard that, I wasn't entirely sure, but it's entirely clear now in that you're saying it essentially doesn't matter in a vacuum what the interest rate is, as long as with that interest rate, which you're locking in. So that's the worst case scenario. You're locking it in. As long as I have net income, as long as the spreadsheet makes sense, then this is an investable property. And then if to the good happens and I can refinance in the future, then wonderful. I'm thrilled, right? It's not that you don't truly care about the interest rate.
Right. Yeah. Like that'll be a icing on the cake, right? But I can't predict interest rates. So why waste my time? I can't predict if this is going to be worth $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, but I don't care because my plan is not to sell it anyway. It's a buy and hold. And then if I do sell it, I'm going to swap it to a 1031 exchange for something that has a better cash flow, or more doors or bigger in some capacity.
Yeah, and that'll have to be a topic for another day. The 1031 exchange, certainly that gets into a little more complexity than we're probably looking to dive into today. But it is really interesting. And for people who are in real estate investing, it's an important thing to know. But I think that ties into what I wanted to ask you about. You said you have more tax breaks the more properties you have. And again, it's probably a little added complexity for one podcast episode, but I'd love to hear just the overview of how you approach this.
Yeah, sure. So let's say you have a $100,000 property. That property consists of the land, the lot underneath the home, and then the property above this. And as a CPA, Brad, you probably are very well aware of this, but I can do cost appreciation on the property itself. So let's say a $100,000 property that I buy, at $20,000 is the land and $80,000 is the cost of the house. So over a 30-year period, I'll probably have to replace the siding, the roof, electrical, everything. So the government says, well, really, it's going to take you 27 and a half years. So they take that $80,000 and you divide it by 27 and a half. And most properties that you buy, that amount of money is considered a loss on your taxes. Additionally, that amount of money typically is higher than what your cash flow is going to be year to year on that property. So when you come tax times, it'll say, this is all the cash flow I made. This is my depreciation. And they usually even out, so you don't pay any taxes. However, if you really want to get advanced, there's something called bonus depreciation, cost segment depreciation, where you can say, hey, instead of spreading this out over 27 and a half years, I'm going to do 3 years worth in year one. And so you're tripling the amount of the deductions that you can get. So if you happen to have a really great cash flowing property, property number 10 is just killing it. Well, because you just bought property number 30, it's going to wipe out the income on that come tax time. And you look like you're a terrible investor when you submit your taxes and you don't have to pay anything.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, this is something that is a little bit confusing to people just off the top of their heads, but it makes sense once you think about it. So what you're describing here is a property that has net income, right? So put this depreciation to the side, and we're talking about this $80,000 property. Let's say you make $200 a month, right? And after all is said and done, you have your rental income, less all of your actual real expenses, and you make $2,400 roughly, of course, it's not exactly, but $2,400 a year in net income. So now normally that would go on your tax return and you would pay taxes based on that $2,400 of income. But now in comes this additional deduction called depreciation, which, as you said, there's no depreciation on land, but it's on all the buildings. So in this case, you have that $80,000 of the actual property, divide by 27 and a half years. So that's straight line depreciation for 27 and a half years.
That's $2,909.
Nice. Yes. So in that case, you're actually deducting that when you're filing your tax return. Sure, you had that $2,400 of income, but you get this additional deduction of $2,909. So you're actually showing a taxable loss of $509, which is fascinating.
Yeah, but then you take that extra $509 and then you apply it to another property. So if you made $509 on another property, then you don't have to pay taxes on that. So the more properties you have, the more of this sort of whack-a-mole game you can play, where you take this depreciation, play whack-a-mole in the cash flow over here. And I know people who will buy a property every single year for the sole reason to play the whack-a-mole so they don't have to pay income taxes from that year. Because the earlier that you buy the property, you can take the most deductions in year one, and year two, and year three. You can kind of front load it if you want to.
And that's with those additional cost segmentation studies. That, again, is kind of outside the scope, but that's something that real estate investors know about. It's something you can essentially pay for this study, and then it enables you to accelerate depreciation based on the segments, because not everything in your property should be depreciated over that straight line 27 and a half. Like if some are, I don't know, I'm thinking furniture and fixtures or whatever, like they have different depreciation rates, so you can accelerate them.
Yes. And then to add on top of that and circle back to the small business analogy, this is a small business. And if you have a mortgage on this property, they're going to say the interest that you have to pay on that mortgage, right? You're paying down the balance, the principal balance, but also the interest that you're paying. That is a business expense, because they're saying you could not run this business without paying that borrowing money. And so that interest, whatever that amount is for the year, that's also taken off your cash flow as another way to not have to pay taxes on rental income. And the way I look at it is, wow, that I get paid twice on that, because really, if I'm renting out this property, my tenant is going to be paying my entire mortgage balance, which includes the principal and the interest. And I'm making money on top of that. And then I get tax breaks as if this is a business expense for me.
Huh. Yeah, it's a compelling picture when you paint it like that. And, and the two pieces of real estate investments that I own, I actually don't have a mortgage on either of them. For me, it was like the sleep well at night test. So I understand this is not the optimal way, but for me, it was, okay, at this point in time, I'm not going to buy the 15, 20, 25 units that I would have to have in my own head to think of it as a true business where, okay, listen, some of these aren't going to be rented, like we talked about before, and the numbers still work. But whereas with one or two properties, if nobody was in them and I had to pay the mortgage and the property tax and everything, that wouldn't pass my sleep well at night test. So while I understand there's obviously opportunity cost on the money that I put down, right? Because that's money that I'm not investing elsewhere. So it's sitting there. So if this thing wasn't rented, there is clearly opportunity cost. But again, that passes my sleep well at night test of, at the worst, I have to pay $1,000 a year for insurance and property taxes on this low cost house, basically.
Well, but what you've just done now is I'm not going to sleep well knowing you invest this way, Brad. So,
okay, well, one of us is sleeping well. Well, hey, maybe we can do a case study on how to kind of up my real estate investing game, because frankly, it's something that I'm interested in. I've completely kind of counteracted my negative early real estate investing failures, which was speculation and my own fault, and I deserve to be punished. All of these things. It wasn't real estate. It was my stupid decision. So I've come to terms with that. And now I've had a very positive experience the last 3 or 4 years with these couple single family rentals that I own. But clearly, and I know this, Alan, that you are not going to pass my, the sleep well at night test for me, because I know it's not optimal. I know that. But at this point, it's like, where do I go from here? Again, knowing that I still do have some psychological baggage with this stuff.
Okay, so this is part of my house fire method in my book. So what I have done in your situation is you can either do a HELOC or a cash out refi on these properties, right? Typically, investment property, it's easier to do a cash out refi. HELOC is a home equity line of credit. And so you have access to that. And so what I do is to reduce my risk. The first time I did this, I had a lot of equity. I was house hacking a duplex. I had a lot of equity. So I did a HELOC. I pulled out $300,000 of equity in my HELOC. And these are big numbers. I've been at this for 22 years, right? I started at $99,000. So I don't want to say these numbers to sound braggy. It's just that this is a real life picture of what happened. So I pulled out $300,000 of my duplex, and I bought the duplex next door. That was $1 million. And so I took that $300,000 and I put it as a down payment, and effectively got the duplex next door for 100% financed, is the way I look at it. Because my down payment was my HELOC, right? And I'm paying interest, it was interest only on that. And then I was buying the property with a mortgage. But the reason I did that was the income that I made from that duplex covered my entire mortgage. It covered my entire HELOC payment. And I had an extra $2,000 on top of that. And so to me, it was, I get a house for free. And then that entire house is going to pay 3 mortgages, essentially. The mortgage on the property, the HELOC that I used on the down payment, and then I had an extra $2,000 that I could use for my primary, but I don't want to pay off my primary because this is working so well, so I just put it into my next real estate investment fund. But the long story short is, as long as you take the money out and you put it in something else that covers the cost of that money, then you're fine. Make sure that those expenses are fixed, and then your rental income is mostly going to be fixed because it's at least fixed for 12 months. So if there are lags of anything, you have a 12-month lag if you have a rental. But the way I did it was, I'm not going to buy anything that's losing me money. I want to make sure I have a bunch of exit strategies there. So an exit is not selling. Maybe I have a lot of pivot strategies. So if this duplex wasn't performing well, I knew I could cut rents $2,000 and I'd still be breaking even. I could do one that's a short-term rental and make a little bit extra money. I could maybe move into one of the units if I need to. I could maybe renovate it and then sell it regardless of the timing and get some extra profit. So I go into a lot of these with a lot of different pivots available. But as long as the overall picture is paying the entire cost of the money that I'm borrowing and all that money that I'm borrowing is fixed, I'm good. And so this is another example that I give quite often on the benefits of having a mortgage and having as many mortgages as possible. In that, I'm down in the South, there's a lot of antique stores and Coca-Cola is headquartered here. You go to any antique store and there's signs that like Coca-Cola for a nickel, right? 5 cents Coca-Cola. And now we're paying $2 a can. So the way I look at that is if I pull into a gas station now and I find let's say a Sacagawea coin on the floor because people aren't interested in it or don't collect them or they didn't really take off, I could pick it up and I could go into the gas station, the convenience store, and say, I want to buy a Snickers. Let's say a Snickers is $1. I traded one Sacagawea coin for a Snickers. I could also take that Sacagawea coin, mail it into mortgage company, LLC, and pay off $1 of my primary mortgage. Okay, let's say I didn't pick up that Sacagawea coin. I come back to that same gas station 15 years later, and it's still sitting there. Now I can pick up that Sacagawea coin 15 years in the future, and I can walk into the convenience store and I can probably buy a third of a Snickers bar because now a Snickers bar is $3 and I can't really do anything with it. But I could still mail that in to bank mortgage company and get a full $1 off my principal. And so the more mortgages you have and the longer time period that you have it, it's going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper for you. So you want as many mortgages as possible because it's going to feel like you're paying 33 cents on the dollar 15 years from now. So why would you want to go ahead and pay them off now? Collect all those Sacagawea coins, buy all the Snicker bars that you want now, but keep that long-term debt open and as long as the line as possible.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. And I've thought about this. This is clearly not with real estate investing, but with my own home, right? So my principal and interest amount, I forget exactly what it is, but it's somewhere just a little bit north of like $1,500 a month, which is not terribly much considering it's like a really nice 4-bedroom house in a nice suburb of Richmond. And I'm thinking, okay, right now I couldn't get a 1-bedroom rental in the same area. And I get this price for the next 28 years of my mortgage term, which is wild. So like in 2050, essentially, I'm still going to be paying $1,500 a month plus or minus for my principal and interest on the home that I live in, which is wild.
Yeah, imagine that we were paying prices for homes 30 years ago, right? The people who have a mortgage that's 30 years and they bought 25 years ago, they're still paying 1980 prices or 1990 prices, right? So that's why I'm like, acquire as many as possible because 20 years, 30 years in the future, you'll be paying 30 year prior prices. And no one expects housing prices to go down that drastically. Like everyone's parents who own a house look like genius real estate investors. And all they did was own a piece of property for 30 years.
Yeah, and I liked your first example also, just as I'm thinking through like how I approach my 2 pieces of property. And in essence, I guess, so I have no mortgage, right? And I'm making a nice, healthy profit or net income each year. And I'm almost viewing that as a dividend. It's just straight coming back to me as net income, as a dividend, and that's that. Whereas what you're describing, and which makes sense, of course, is you're in essence compounding that by taking that money that's sitting there in the equity, right? It's essentially sitting there in the walls and using that for a better use, right? I mean, for lack of a better term, in that, okay, you're taking that money and you're investing it and getting a better return. Because by definition, I guess in this case, that next property that you'd be buying would be making more income because, again, we're investing based on spreadsheet decisions, right? As you said, that even with the mortgage situation, it will be making more income than what I'm expending in the mortgage interest expense, because, or otherwise I wouldn't do it, right? So on its very definition, it is probably a better use of that income and of that equity that's just sitting there otherwise. So, okay, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this, and that's why you hear me kind of stumbling over my words, Alan. But it's an interesting thought, but like it's funny because it's still not compelling enough that I'm going to run out and do it tomorrow, that I'm going to take money out, but I'm actually considering it for the first time.
I mean, what you're doing right now is you're taking a lot of money and stuffing it under your mattress. And we all laugh at people like that. We're like, that's silly. What if your house burns down and everything, or you get robbed? And so you're doing that. You have all this money under your mattress and under one house, all your eggs in one basket. What if that house burns down? And so to me, have some faith in the numbers. I mean, you're a former CPA, right? You've got some knowledge with numbers and comfort level, and it's really owning a bunch of small businesses.
Yeah. I mean, so yes and no in that, like, it's not stuffing it under your mattress in the sense that there is a cost to the borrowing of that money, right? So by having that equity, so having that mortgage paid off, I'm clearly not incurring an expense. So like by no measure would I say it's stuffed under my mattress, but I would also, to your point, and great credit here, I would clearly say it's not the highest use of that money. And I think that's the most compelling point.
I think you're focused on the expenses and I'm focused on the income. And so if you focused on the income, you could say, wow, I would have a lot more tax breaks. I would be able to raise the rent of 2 or 3 or 4 properties every year instead of just one. I could reduce my expenses with a property manager because I own multiple properties. So that comes back to the expenses for you. But to me, I am just focusing on the income. And that was a switch that I had to turn from lean fire to get to fat fire, which was, man, if I just focused on income, sky's the limit. If I'm focusing on expenses, there is a literal floor. Like I can't reduce my expenses anymore. You've done that. You've hit the floor of your expenses, but you haven't hit the ceiling of your income because there is no ceiling on income.
Yeah, I appreciate that in real life for sure. And I think that is a super compelling point just for the fire movement generally, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's something that we do lose sight of sometimes. And I think we've tried really hard on this show to kind of dispel that myth because, Alan, you are spot on, right? So clearly, I think somebody approaching FI, and let's put real estate aside for a couple of minutes, like there is a floor on what you can cut in expenses, right? So I think somebody coming into the world of FI, I think the low hanging fruit is to cut some of these maybe frivolous things or things that have built up on you. And I think that is a wise decision. But I don't think that's the optimal path to get to FI, certainly in an abbreviated period of time, right?
So my first book, A Million Bucks by 30, I had a $40,000 job in Manhattan. I lived off 30% of that roughly. My take home at the end of the day was $19,000 because I put 60% of what my take home pay into investing. And I was living in the projects and I was like, there's got to be a way out. And I knew I couldn't control my income at where I was at my day job. Typically sales is the best way to have unlimited income. Every company I've ever worked for, the salesperson actually made more money than the CEO. But I was working a tech support job and I just relied on that bonus. So my only way out was to reduce as much expensive as possible and then put as much money as I could into investing. But once I sort of got out of that mentality and out of that position, and once my real estate started making me more money than my day job, then the floodgates just opened and like a whole new light turned on and I had all these new paths that I could take.
Nice. Yeah. And I think clearly growing your income just in general for everybody. And this is why we talk so much about reskilling, retooling, negotiating your salary, right? Like these things, not just getting stuck and expecting that your company is going to do the best for you, right? Because what usually happens on the other side of that is 2 or 3% raises. And as we know, when you switch jobs, switch companies, that's normally when you get those big leaps up. And it's just the practical reality, sadly, of the world that, yeah, your current company most of the time is not going to look out for you unless you basically put their feet to the fire and have a job offer in hand. Then all of a sudden, magically, they can come up with the money, right?
Right. Yeah. And I know I keep talking about my books, but my second book is called The Subversive Job Search, and it's all about how to get more money out of your day job.
Nice.
And I think a lot of people get safe and they get comfortable. Studies show, and what I used to a T was job hopping every single 2 years because I knew they weren't going to take care of me. And so I reverse engineered. I was like, I'm making $40,000. I just thought I'd be happy if I could make $100,000. So I pulled all the $100,000 jobs that I thought that I might be interested in, put them in a word cloud. And so then what happened is that the biggest words, I'm like, I have to have that on my resume. And a lot of them were needed an MBA, and I wasn't able to go get my MBA, didn't have the time or the money, but I found equivalent certificates that they would accept. And so then I would find the job listings and the positions, and I basically created this resume that every 2 years I would just be constantly sending out. And then all of a sudden I would get a $20,000 raise, then a $50,000 raise, and a $100,000 raise. And in 2.5 years, I went from $40,000 to $150,000 because I was like, they don't care about me. I don't care about them. I just want to hit $150,000. Well, I just wanted to hit 100, but I ended up hitting 150. At the end of the day, I was like, what I realized is I don't want to work for anyone. I just want to work for myself, but it allowed me to get more mortgages. And that's why I was in it. Because I was like, I need to buy more property. I have to have a higher income because my debt to income was so out of whack with all these properties. So it was a means to the end. So I was using them as much as they were using me. I was still a good employee. I got, raises every year and everything, but there was no loyalty for me. And I think that's how people need to approach it. It sounds bad. It sounds crooked, but to me, it comes back to real estate. That was a lifestyle decision. A lot of people, their job's a lifestyle decision. They're like, hey, I like to commute. It's good enough. Nothing was ever good enough for me in the corporate world, no matter what, because I just knew I didn't want to be in the corporate world long term.
Yeah. And I don't think it sounds bad. I truly don't. I think if we go with the ethos of like the old school 1970s, 80s, et cetera, that the company's going to take care of you and you're going to be there for 25 years and get the gold watch and yada, yada, yada. Like, that's not the way the world works anymore. I think you can be a good employee and do your job and do everything that's expected of you and still be looking out for yourself. Because frankly, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The company is not looking out for you. That's just not the way the world works.
And you might have the best relationship, rapport. The CEO just is like, I could not be here without you. And then that CEO gets fired. and you get some new person from a different country, different state, different business, your competitor, and you've lost 20 years of goodwill and you had nothing to do with it, right? And so they're not family members that are going to stick around forever, right? Your
Yeah.
boss is going to go get a new job, or your coworkers will leave over time, and no one's going to remember the 20 years of toiling that you put in.
Yeah, I heard an interesting quote. I don't remember exactly who it was. But it was on a podcast recently. It was something to the effect of, "Your local cemetery is filled with indispensable people."
Oh gosh, yeah,
Right, and that just hit me some kind of interesting way, and yeah, it's true. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like you said, you use the word kind of jokingly crooked. Obviously, that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about using very smart, understanding the rules of the game. And that's what FI is, right? It's understanding the reality of the world. And sadly, the reality of the world is, in your normal job, you're very rarely going to do better than 2, 3, or 4% annual raises. Period. End of story. You might have the one unicorn company that's giving you more than that, but that's very few and far between. And the sad practical reality is, you often have to leave, or not threaten to leave, because you can only go to that well once, but have another job offer in hand. And if you truly love your company, give them a chance to match it, or give them a chance to do better.
And then now that I'm on the other side and I'm a small business owner myself and I've got employees, I think of it this way: like there's some employees that, man, if they leave, my business is really going to suffer. And so I take really good care of them, right? But I understand maybe they get a $20,000 somewhere else because they were job hunting, which I think everyone should always be job hunting. Then I'm in a position as a business owner. Hey, either I'm going to pay you $20,000 to keep you, or I'm going to let you go. But the only reason I'm going to let you go is because I literally don't have the $20,000 to pay you, right? If I had it and I could do it, and it was in the budget and made sense, I will definitely match that offer because you're so crucial to my business. But if you leave, I would never have given you that raise because I just don't have it in the business funds to give it to you. So I will be giving you 2 to 3% and trying to give you, maybe extra vacation days and all this stuff. But so if you're wanting that bump, you're going to put your boss in a position where they'll match it if they can. If they can't, then it's the right decision to leave because they're never going to have that money to keep you there.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense. And that's where open communication helps as well, right? That's really important. You're not like, this is no gotcha. You're not trying to stick it to somebody. It's, if you really like the company you're working for, and like you're saying, you're a small business, right? Like you own a small business. The reality for you might not be that you can pay that extra 20,000, but maybe you can come up with some other non-monetary ways that could be worthwhile. So I mean, that's a negotiation just like anything. But yeah, I mean, it's case by case. So I think it's funny, we got off on this little sidebar, Alan, but I think it's important. And I did want to go back. So you challenged me a little bit. I would love to maybe do a follow-up episode almost precisely around what you were talking about, which is, that I'm only looking at the expenses side. Again, we're going back to the real estate.
Yeah.
And I love the challenge, Alan, frankly. And, I like to self-deprecate and I like to play off that sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. But in terms of like small business accounting and thinking through numbers, I would put myself up with just about anyone and in fluency of it. But I'm also always open-minded to say that I could be wrong. And I have had like a number of real estate people in the past, and I say that I don't lump you in there because I'm saying this as like a pejorative, but like talk about these magic 20% returns, and when I like face them with reality, it very quickly becomes, oh yeah, that was impossible, or there's no there in essence, but I think there is a there potentially here. But I don't think it's as cut and dried as maybe we're making it out to be. So like, I would actually love to run like a horse race in terms of like, we can actually I'm willing to use my real numbers on my 2 real estate properties and like literally go into it and run like a horse race where, okay, you walk me through, and we won't literally do it in reality at first, but I'm willing to say, let's do it in reality, right? And see what happens, because there's additional complexity here in every way, both like where I'm thinking that you might be missing, but also clearly that I'm missing as well. And I think that would be really illustrative for me, potentially you and the audience as well.
I'm in on that because I like to hear all the objections, and I feel like I've gotten all the objections over years and years, but I think you would probably come up with new ones for me and challenge me. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that could be really great. I like it. And so let's talk way back at the beginning of the episode. You said that you recently sold a 50 unit place. And I'm curious, again, this is going to be more for maybe advanced real estate investors and not the person looking to buy their first door. Right. But talk me through, and I don't need the exact details, obviously, of the dollar figures, but
yeah, I can tell you. But
okay, you had 350 units plus or minus, and you sold a 50 unit place. Let's talk through that.
Okay. So there's a town an hour south of where I live in Atlanta. It's called Griffin, Georgia. And actually, a client of mine said, "Hey, Alan, this guy's retiring and he's selling a 30 home single family portfolio and has been on the market for over a year." And so we looked into it, and it was basically he had listed all 30 homes separately for like $35,000 each. But when you read it into it, you look at it and it's like, you must buy all 30 at the same time. And so anyone who had like a $1.5 million budget or what was, that was nine, that was
a little over $1 million.
Yeah. Yeah. $1 million budget, that wasn't on their radar, right? That was showing up on everyone's radar that had a $35,000 budget. And so that's why it sat there for a year. And so, we went in and my partner's like, I can't afford these, because he was looking at $30,000 homes. And I was like, okay, let's partner, let's buy this together. And so we negotiated and we realized it was a seller who was retiring. And he had built these up over, 40 years in town. And his kids had no interest in real estate. Or I should say, no interest in real estate investing because one of his kids was the real estate agent that we were working with. And so we approached them and said, "Hey, we would like to buy this. It's going to be difficult to get financing for 30. This was 3 years ago for this huge portfolio. Would you do a seller financing note?" And he agreed. So he gave us 10% down payment. 15-year mortgage at 7% interest rate. So 3 years ago, this was double the going interest rate, but every other investment, you're going to have to put 20 or 25% down. So we're basically buying $1 million portfolio that was cash flowing, even at a 7% interest rate and a 15-year amortization. It just seemed like a no-brainer. And this was in a small town. So of course this happens, you buy one, and then his buddy is like, "Oh, you're buying portfolios? I want to retire." And then they call me and they say, "Hey, you just bought this one. Will you buy my 5?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll buy 5." And then every single real estate agent's like, "Well, this guy just bought, 35 in the 30-day period." So every single listing, they started calling me like, "What are you looking for? What are you looking for?" Hey, this is my criteria. And I was just buying them at $30,000 a pop. On average, I think it was $29,000 to $35,000 on each one. And I was like, if you give me a house that cash flows $600 or more, that's under $35,000, I'm going to buy it all day. And so over a 1-year period, I bought a total of 50 single family homes. And then my partner wanted to sell. And so, but I saw that this was a gold mine and he wanted to go invest in something else. So I bought my partner out. And what I did is with that cash flow, I put back into the homes because these homes all had deferred maintenance. So everything, I didn't live off the cash flow. I didn't use the cash flow for anything, but put it back into all these properties because now I had 50 and there's always some roof that needed to be fixed or something that's been neglected. And then, earlier this year, I just started selling them to Open Door. Honestly, I started one at a time selling them at Open Door because they were willing to give me $75,000 to $100,000 each. Open Door has a terrible business model. They're not real estate investors. What they're really trying to do is buy me as a customer. It's sort of a loss leader, so that then when I buy my next property, I will use them as my mortgage lender, or I will use them as my real estate agent, or something like that. So they're willing to lose money on real estate investments and overpay for it, which is going to be the demise to them, by the way. And if you have their stock, you should definitely short their stock. But I benefited, so they were giving
not financial advice, but your personal.
Yes. And I rarely give stock advice, but this is such a sure winner based on these things that they were buying from me. And then once you sort of get these onesies and twosies out of there, and that I knew I had to package them together to sell them to another investor, because it's the same sort of thing. An investor who's new to the area or wants to come to the area, they're going to get scale if they can get 10 or more, because they get a cheaper price on property management, and I'll tell you, like, if you own 50 homes and you want something painted that day, every painter in town is going to come paint it that day because they want your business on your other 49 homes, right? Same with the plumber, same with everything. So all of a sudden I was a big shot in a small town that I've never even been to. And I bought these properties sight unseen. I should mention that. It just was so good on a spreadsheet. I was like, yeah, let's buy these. All of a sudden I was getting all this special treatment and selling it to someone else. An investor comes in, and we talked about a 1031 exchange. Basically what that is that you've made a lot of money in real estate investing, you've sold something, and you have a time limit to reinvest it. So then I could sell this to another investor. And now the loan products are single family portfolios are now a more commonplace investment strategy. Now that Wall Street sort of moved in and started doing these things. So there's loan products for that now. And so he was able to get a loan product, and I sold this for $2.5 million. So I had a net profit of $1 million with a 2.5 year hold. And it cost me nothing because the cash flow was paying for all the renovations. And I just basically bought it all in, all these onesies, twosies. I bought it all in at 1.5, sold it at 2.5. And that's one of 3 times that I made $1 million profit on the sale of a property. And I did not go into this thinking I'd make $1 million on the sale. I went into this because I liked the $50, $100 I was making on each house. I bought it for the cash flow. That's what I buy everything for. And I say every property you buy comes with imaginary lottery tickets. Those imaginary lottery tickets are rapid appreciation, something that I have no control of. And all 3 times I made $1 million profit on property, it was all because of rapid appreciation. So if I would have bought one house in one neighborhood, I would not have gotten that. But because I buy in a bunch of different neighborhoods, one neighborhood's going to take off and just make my properties double, triple in value. Nothing to do with me. I'm not smart. I'm not a genius. I bought for a $50 cash flow on each house, and it paid off. And so if you have all your eggs in one basket, it's like riding one stock. You hope that one stock takes off. But if I spread out my stocks across 10, I'm not in a mutual fund. 10, one of them could take off, and it's going to make up for 9 losses.
Yeah, and that again is that mutual fund approach, which really does appeal to me, and I think it appeals to a lot of people in the financial independence community. I guess kind of going back, this is where like the rubber hits the road with real estate investing, and there's no right answer, right? So I'm putting myself in your shoes and saying, okay, I've got $1 million appreciation that I can sell and liquidate this thing, and this is $1 million profit that I've booked. Right. But then on the other hand, I'm saying, okay, I've got 50 properties approximately that I bought for 30 grand each. So I'm in 1.5 million, right?
Well, 50. Well, yeah, I 30. The first 30 I bought for 30, and then the next, well, it was 50 properties roughly at 30. So that's 1.5 million. But yes, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, right. It averages. Yeah. It averages roughly. So, but I guess if you're getting, and just bear with me, Alan, because I think this is my question. I think it'll be illustrative to the audience. Is you're getting about $600 a month from these, right? So that's the gross rental income is $600 a month, which according to like that, the 1% rule we talk about, this is actually 2% rule, which means you're getting roughly, and again, this is on average across the 50 unit portfolio, you're getting a 24% gross return, right? And then obviously you back out all the expenses, including mortgage, which is on here. But I think, Bigger Pockets usually uses, and people like Chad Carson and Paula Pan, they usually use like 50% as the expenses as a rough amount. So you're making potentially, and plus or minus, of course, like you said, there's some deferred maintenance on these. So it's probably a little bit higher, or a little bit less income, but you're making about a 12% return on these things.
Well,
And that's
my mortgage was a 15-year instead of 30, so my mortgage payment was a little bit bigger.
okay. So it's up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a little bit higher interest rate, but yeah.
Yeah. So again, I'm just looking at it as like, okay, that $1 million would be hard to pass up, but this is something that's potentially, after those mortgages are paid off, this might be a 15% annual return, an 18% annual return, something like that in 15 years. Do I have a higher use of the money? And I think that to me might be the operative question for everything we do in investing, right? Is like, do I have a higher use of the money than what I'm currently invested in? And that's hard.
Yeah. I mean, if I would have just waited the 15 years to pay it off, I mean, it was 2.5 years in, I had like 12 years to go. If those were paid off, I would probably, I think after the property management and insurance and everything, it was something like I'd be making $30,000 a month, which was like, oh, I'll just hold on to these and retire. But why not just take that $1 million and go buy a $2 million property, and then like have 50% down payment, right? And I could make the exact same cash flow, but it's all in one part of town. It's all in one building. So I can buy all the tile in bulk and the paint in bulk because every unit's the same. All the floor plans are the same. And I don't have to have 12 different carpet, supplies or whatever it is. But it just makes my life easier, the fewer doors I have. And that goes back to the very beginning. Like how many doors you have, it really tells, how complicated your life is.
Yeah. And I think that's what's funny, right? Is like there's the quantitative and there's the qualitative, right? And I think return on hassle is actually something that is often overlooked. And I think Nick Majuli talked about this recently on our podcast. I think that's where I got the quote. So I'll try to update it if I'm misattributing. But that return on hassle is really important. And you're describing that here in that, right? Like, hey, the fewer doors I have, the less hassle I have.
But to be fair now, I've outsourced everything. So I can get up to 300 without any hassle because I have property management companies handling everything in every single town now. So it has become hassle-free for me, but it took time to get there.
Yeah. And, again, it's my own kind of wondering about the real estate world. It's like, yeah, you described, okay, I have a 2% rule here. And then you're just saying, okay, but I could just put it into one property and get the same return. But I wonder if you could, right? Like in that, could you really get 2% of the purchase price of a luxury place in terms of gross rent every month?
So here's the thing. Like when you scale up to commercial properties, which are 5 units or more, it's a little bit different and way more advantageous. So a lot of people say, the reason Open Door was buying these properties overpriced is because they own 100 in a zip code. And if they pay, $75,000 more than what it's worth, then it automatically on an appraisal, it makes the rest of their portfolio 70,005 times, all 99 other homes. And I know for sure that that's not the truth because I sold 6 homes to Open Door for way over and had no effect on the value of my 44 other ones because an appraiser is going to be like, well, that was a rare price or it doesn't even show up in the MLS because they bought it off market anyway. But a real estate agent and a buyer is going to be like, I'm not going to pay those prices, and it doesn't even make sense to an investor because then it's not cash flowing anymore.
Alan, actually, I want to jump in because when you said I'm going to sell the 50 units and get one piece of property and get the same return, my brain, and this is what, and I suspect a lot in the audience went there as well, are thinking, okay, now I'm going to buy a $2.5 million luxury house. And now that is not what you're describing at all. When you said one piece of property, your brain, because you're steeped in real estate, went to a commercial property that, yes, it is one location, and maybe has the economies of scale of like, okay, I only have one roof, albeit a much larger roof, but it's only one roof, etc. But there are many doors. So I think that's where the piece of clarification is so, so important, because in my head, I'm thinking, Alan, you're nuts. There is no world where you're getting a 2% rule, if you will, return on like one luxury property. That's not possible, as you described
Right.
earlier in the episode. But that clearly wasn't what you were talking about. You were talking about making your life easier by having a commercial property that's maybe an apartment complex or some such.
Right. Yes. And then so you turn that into a commercial property. And what's the difference is if you have, let's assume, I've got two single family homes that are exactly the same next door to each other. One rents for $1,000 because the landlord's awesome and does everything great. And the other one rents for $200 for whatever reason. And that $200 one sells for $80,000. No matter what I do, even though mine is making $100,000 on a residential appraisal, it's going to say, well, the exact same house sells, next door for this price. So this is what yours is priced at. So I really can't push the value too much on a small multifamily or single family by juicing the rents. Commercial world's exactly the opposite. The entire property is based on a business, spreadsheet, right? How much money it makes is how much it's worth. So if I can take that $1 million and I put it into, let's say, a 20-unit apartment building, and I can find a way to save on electricity bills, it makes the property value go up. It doesn't make it also makes my bottom line go up, but it makes my property value go up. If I carve out the basement and put storage units in there and lockers and charge $50 a locker, I just made 50 times 20 units. That makes the property value go up. It's completely based on the income that it makes. Now, if I really, really want to go commercial and take away all of my headaches and make my life easier, I could buy something that's called a triple net property. A triple net property or in property is basically if you buy a Chase Bank, a Taco Bell, all these major chains. None of them actually own the real estate. None of them own the real estate, and none of them want to own the real estate. And so they will sign a triple net lease that basically says, hey, will you buy this piece of property that we want to build our franchise on? It'll have the corporate backing of this major Fortune 500 company. That's who's signing the lease. So it's guaranteed. And they're going to say, get out of the way. We're going to do all the property taxes. We're going to do the insurance. We're going to do all the renovations. We're going to pave the parking lot. We're going to do everything. We just don't want to own the property. And we will pay you a monthly amount each month. And so the returns are really, really low on that. Like you might get 4 to 5% returns on your money, but it's completely risk-free and no work whatsoever. So that's another way where you could take that $1 million and say, hey, I've got 50, like you said, 50 roofs to worry about. So I'm going to have to, if I hold these long enough, I'm going to have to replace every roof at some point. I want to have 50 landscaping bills. I want to have 50 pest control bills. I can either buy an apartment complex where I only have one roof to worry about, one property tax to worry about, or I can buy a commercial property that's more of a retail property that they handle all that and it's out of sight and out of mind.
Yeah, I like it. So this is, it's giving us a mental framework for how to think through really early into mid-career and potentially advanced, as you're talking about, real estate strategies. And that's what's cool. Like I can actually see that path for myself now, which is pretty cool. And I'm really excited, Alan, to have you back on. I think that horse race example that we're going to set up, it'll be really good. I think it'll be useful.
I'm excited about that. And if I can turn you into a real estate maximalist, then, I know that this real estate religion that I'm trying to cultivate is working.
Nice. All right, Alan, this has been fantastic. Thank you so very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. So I mentioned your book and your podcast, but certainly reiterate, tell people where they can find you, the best way to get in touch.
Yeah, I'm on social media at Real Estate Maxi, MAXI, mostly on Twitter, but also on all the social medias. But check out my website, realestatemaxi.com as well. And I am always talking real estate. As you can tell, it's a passion of mine. So thanks for having me. Let me share my stories.
Yeah, this has been fun, Alan. Really, really appreciate it. To the audience, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Definitely check out Alan's stuff. He is a true expert, as you can tell. He's passionate about this, as you can obviously tell. So All right. Until next time, we have that horse race set up. Alan, thanks again.
Thanks, Brad.